Welcome to OK Miniatures. A few weeks ago, a friend was interested in some Roman soldiers for representing the arm of God, so I dug into the available miniatures, and I found these Roman soldiers, which didn't work for him, but I still think are pretty cool, and they'd be even cooler standing with their shields together in a phalanx. Originally, I wanted to use a bunch of these guys, but only a few of the positions seemed like they'd work without major modifications, which is probably just as well, since, well, let's just say they weren't particularly cooperative. And now I have a few on hand for future projects. I found a piece of wood for my base and set about positioning the soldiers. I settled on using 6. Typically, a phalanx would have more soldiers than that, but these Romans aren't fighting your typical battle. The shields for these minis don't feel super secure, and they have this weird hole in the middle, so I used some milliput to secure their hands on the shields a bit better and fill in that hole. I did need to reposition some of their arms to get the shields to fit together nicely. Fortunately, they didn't get too bent out of shape over it. The extra little bit of milliput I used to make a few bits that will be important later. I also had to chop off the right feet for the kneeling soldiers since the feet were right where the standing soldiers needed to stand. Fret not, they were offered anesthesia. Alright, time to lay this all out on the base. So the Romans are backed up against a cave, shielding themselves from this angry cloud. Obviously, that cloud represents a monster. But which? I really wanted to have fire blasting against the shields. It took me a bit to find a sculpt that matched what I had envisioned, but I eventually found an epic brass dragon sculpted by MZ4250, which I printed out on my resin printer. Apparently the sculpt didn't have any pokey bits on the body, so I just used a little bit more milliput to give her a spine. That'll come in handy fighting the Romans. I also added 2 spear shafts, one broken from a previous fight and the other complete from this battle. These battle wounds go nicely with the slightly misprinted wing that sort of looks like a tear that hasn't healed properly. Now that I knew all the pieces to this diorama, I cut the base down to its final length and then started on the terrain. I cut a piece of foam to fit the base and then carved up some pieces to make a cave in the corner. I also chopped away some of the ground in front of the cave to give some variation. Next, I mixed up some casting, plastery, powder, glue, and black paint, which I spread over the cave and base to cover the foam and to give some texture. It would have been nice to have a little dirt in here too, but I didn't have any baked and ready to go. Since it was a bit runny without any dirt, I dabbed off some of the extra with a paper towel. While that dries, it's time to paint up these minis, starting with some spray paint. I guess I mixed up the spray paint with the splotch paint. We'll just pretend that didn't happen. Originally I thought the classic red-gold combo would look good, but it wasn't sitting right for me. These aren't your standard Roman soldiers, they're hunters, dragon hunters. After some consideration, I switched to a green-silver scheme, and I'm so glad I did. It fits their roles so much better, and it looks good. This brass dragon is actually a moderately rare red brass dragon, so I painted her accordingly. She did request a pedicure, so I did a quick job, and I gotta say, it doesn't look half bad. Of course, she has to be breathing fire, but I don't want these Romans getting hurt too badly after giving them such a lovely paint job. So I swapped the fire for some yellow tinted cotton balls. A little bit of red and black spray paint, and you can hardly tell the difference. At this point, the base was dry, so I gave the cave a quick paint job starting with black deep inside, and then working towards a brownish-grayish color at the entrance and for the rocky top. While that dried, I used tan and a variety of other neutral colors for the ground in front of the cave. Then I went back to the cave and gave it a quick dry brush with some gray paint. After clipping the minis off their bases, all the things were ready to assemble. So it's time to answer the pressing question. But why are these soldiers hunting dragons? Well, they're not hunting dragons per se. In fact, they don't really want to be fighting this dragon. And they're not as foolish as they seem getting trapped between the dragon's cave and the dragon. They were hoping to sneak into her lair while she was off hunting, grab the treasure, and skedaddle before the dragon got back. But this dragon is highly possessive of said treasure, because this isn't just another gold stash. No, these Romans are after dragon eggs, and they aren't the first to try here. Why dragon eggs? For Caesar, and not as a delicacy. A few years back, the Roman people grew bored with the gladiator battles. Could only watch a man fight a man or a tiger maul a man so many times. So when a few Roman soldiers brought a dragon head back from an expedition, Caesar knew this was his ticket to a long, peaceful reign. or at least a slightly delayed revolution. Of course, keeping a wild adult dragon is rather challenging, and while they managed to pull it off a few times, it'd be much simpler to raise dragons for this purpose. And if they could manage to start a dragon hatchery, perhaps some of the dragons could even be used by the army. So Caesar has appointed one of his legions to this task. They didn't start as anything special, which can make people underestimate them and their task of hunting dragons. In fact, compared to other soldiers with gold and brass, their steel can seem rather plain. But there is a strategy behind this decision. You see, when you're hunting creatures that hoard gold, well, wearing gold is like painting a big target on yourself, while steel just doesn't have that same hoarding appeal. They aren't looking to find all the dragons after all. They want one or two, preferably of egg variety. But they have opted to keep some gold on the shields. Not only does it show much better when they're in Rome, but it can be an excellent decoy when trying not to get eaten. Of course, it would be a disgrace to lose your shield, so most soldiers would choose to be eaten, but it is an option. Anywho, back to this diorama. An exploratory group of soldiers discovered this dragon's nest, thought they'd grab a couple eggs real quick, and live happily ever after on a pension from Caesar. A few of them even managed to survive the day and told the captain of the dragon acquisition team of their escapades, who, in turn, sent 6 of his elite dragon hunters to this cave. But during that first fight, one of the eggs was broken, and now the dragon is more protective than ever. So at first scent of intruders, she headed back to her cave. And can you blame her? I mean, look at the size of the egg. That couldn't have been easy. I placed a few trees to balance out the diorama and hide the dragon's toothpick stand, but misjudged the placements, so I added a shrubbery directly underneath the dragon to hide the toothpick. Not my favoritist, but it gets the job done. A few more shrubberies scattered here and there, and a few to keep the egg warm, and all that remains is to give this a nice black border. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't steal any dragon eggs.